JJ, did you know that today is National Dice Day?
Oh! Jack and Jill went up the hill, each with $1.25.
Wrong dice, wrong dice, wrong dice.
Some people will tell you to play it safe, but we're here to tell you to go all out. Welcome to the All Out Blitz. I'm your host, JJ Wenne, and I am joined by the loquacious Lothario himself, Doug Orth. Tonight on the show, Doug is going to share the insight he has gained from watching the film and diving into the analytics from week 13. So, Doug, let's jump right into this. Sometimes in life, we have moments of clarity, moments where everything becomes clear and the way forward is obvious. For me, personally, it was writing down notes after each lesson I teach to remember what I need to change going forward into the next year. Now, I am not sure what the moment was for Bryce Young, but dear Lord, something has changed. Doug, what are you seeing on the film?
Well, just what you're saying here, it is difficult to remember the last time a young quarterback made the kind of turnaround within the same season that we're seeing from Young right now. Hey, you remember JJ, just 2 months ago, he was considered a massive bust and was likely doomed to be a career backup. I remember hearing that multiple times.
Mm-hmm.
While there is admittedly much room for improvement on what he has done since taking back the starting job 5 games ago, consider the following metrics on the chart that JJ is about to pull up here. Now, I see that I know there's a lot of green there, but I want you to pay particular attention to the areas highlighted in green. And we're talking the ones that aren't explained here: completion percentage, passing yards per game, yards per attempt, quarterback rating, average depth of target, and then pressure percentages, how often the quarterback is being pressured.
Okay.
So even that one, we're seeing a 10.3% drop off in pressure. Partially because you look to see the time to throw. Time to throw is now 2.27 as opposed to 2.51. Why does that mean anything? Because we like to give our quarterbacks 2.5 seconds in the pocket. So when he was taking 2.5 seconds to throw, guess what? He was feeling pressure over a third of the time. Now it's a quarter of the time. Let me be clear about what you're seeing here. None of these metrics that you're seeing is elite. Okay. Young was drafted number 1 overall last year with the expectation that he would play at this level early last season before making a year 2 leap this year.
Okay.
With that said, most of his improvement has come since Deontay Johnson. Remember, he was the player that Panthers traded for this offseason to make Young's job easier because of his elite separation skills. Before he was shipped to the Ravens, and before Adam Thielen returned from his hamstring injury, he injured himself in week 3 and didn't return until week 12. So what am I saying? In Young's improvement has happened basically while relying heavily on 3 rookies. We're talking about first-round draft choice Xavier Legette, fourth-round draft choice Jatavion Sanders, who we discussed on the show a couple weeks ago,
Yep,
and undrafted free agent Jalen Coker as his primary targets. That's almost unheard of in the NFL to rely on 3 rookies. Actually, the only time I can remember back, I didn't research this. This is just from my history. I was a Bengals fan years ago, 20, 30 years ago. And I remember I remember them having Peter Warrick and Ron Dugans. They were both from Florida State. They were both rookie receivers at the time. And I'm blanking on the quarterback. But to have 2 starting rookie receivers at the same time, we're talking about 2 rookies and a rookie tight end. So a little bit off course, but just to tell you how rare I think it is. Unsurprisingly, Young's production has taken another step since Thielen returned in week 12, as the next chart we're going to see here illustrates. Again, pay attention to the areas highlighted in green. We notice that the pressure percentage and the time to throw has went up a little bit, but the A dot has come up almost a full yard, which would explain some of that. So what we're seeing is deeper. Now we're starting to see deeper throws, and the completion percentage hasn't really dropped off much of it, as if at all, and then the passing yards per game has skyrocketed. All right, you can bring that down, whatever, JJ. Retired NFL quarterback Chase Daniel. You'll know him from the NFL Network, The Athletic. He has the pod with Diana Rossini from The Athletic. Anyway, Chase Daniel did a wonderful job of highlighting 8 plays from week 2 that likely made head coach Dave Canales' decision to bench Young in late September an easy one. And please, for anything that we're going to refer to the Fantasy Points article, please check the link in that article. That link runs a bit long, but it's worth your time. You'll definitely gain an appreciation for some X's and O's if you do so. Among other things in that clip, Young's footwork was subpar. He was not reading plays out, and he panicked too much in the pocket. In fact, the footwork was almost high schoolish. He regressed to a point. It's unbelievable that a pro quarterback could regress to the point that he was in week 2. Anyway, Canales did him no favors by holding Young out for all the preseason games. You remember that, right? Young did not play at all during the preseason because he had seen he locked up the job. Okay, I don't think Canales did him any favors by doing that. And then something that Chase Daniel highlighted in his breakdown: too many empty sets early in the season. That's great when you have a Detroit level offensive line. They brought in a couple guards. We talked about that over the summer. They brought in a couple guards to improve the line, and it has improved. But Carolina had no business running empty sets with its offensive line. So those two things, holding Young out all preseason and calling too many empty sets, that was just a recipe for disaster for a quarterback who took 62 sacks and felt pressure on nearly 40% of his dropbacks as a rookie. Now, again, I'm going to refer to my article for some clips here, but week 13 illustrated his growth since his benching. There was an empty set in the second quarter when they were at the Bucs 10-yard line. And this is the one that he scored the running touchdown on. You can almost just see it watching it from the broadcast view. Young looks very composed and balanced in the pocket. He's hopping on his feet, on his toes, which is what you want. You don't want your quarterbacks to be flat-footed. And then when the rush came past him, he did not hesitate to step up, and then he saw where the linebackers were, and then he busted his butt to the pylon and went in for like a 10-yard touchdown. Then there was a I guess quick turnaround that Carolina intercepted Baker Mayfield right around midfield, and so the Panthers had about a 40-second 2-minute drive, if that makes sense. Shouldn't we just call it a 40-second drill?
Maybe.
But you're seeing now. I understand that during 2-minute drill situations, defenses tend to play a little bit lax, but you see the confidence that he sees it, he throws it, boom, it's not. He's thrown with anticipation. You just saw him exuding confidence again. Why do I mention these things about the composure, the balance on his feet, the confidence? Those things just weren't there in the first 2 weeks. They just weren't. All right. I gave you my thoughts. What are your thoughts on Mr. Young?
My thoughts on Mr. Young. It seems to me, I was like watching last week's game. Early, I think it might have been the first drive. He took 2 deep shots. It was a 3-and-out. They didn't connect, but both passes that he took deep, I was like, oh, that's a solid pass. Like he just missed. And, I mentioned earlier in the intro to this segment that, we never know when that moment of clarity is going to hit us, right? We never know what happens. But sometimes people have different learning styles.
Yeah.
As a teacher, it's something I have to know. And it's almost as if Bryce needed to realize that, if I step up a little bit, this is what happens. If I do this, this is what happens. And by not doing the preseason, he missed those reps. And he had all that negative feedback, like you
Yeah.
said, from the 60-plus sacks from a year ago. So when he steps onto that field, that's still the mindset he was in. So what has changed? Belief. He believes. And I know that's silly. Like, sometimes like my kids will make fun of me because I'm trying to be all inspirational. But it's true. If you have the right mindset, if you have belief in your skills, which had to have been damaged with a terrible year last year, a rough start to this year, you have to get that out of your head. And maybe by letting him sit for a couple of weeks, he cleared that crap out of his head and started to see things a little bit more clearly. And now he's showing that he believes.
And if I can just add to this, I mean, you remember that last year it was Frank Reich for the first half of the season, then it was Thomas Brown for the second half. And I know they're keeping the same plays, the same philosophies for the most part. You're just changing the voice, but you're still changing the voice. You're still changing part of the operation. You can maybe do that with a 5-year veteran and not see the effects as much. Take Josh Allen last year, right? You change coordinators midseason. Now I know they changed what their emphasis was, going from pass happy to more of a balance or even slightly run heavy. But you can't do that with a rookie with a bad offensive line and hope that. So he was already on coordinator number 3 or play caller number 3 when he started this season. Didn't have the preseason to work any of that out. So yeah, I agree.
Yeah. So I mean, what do you think though this means for fantasy?
Okay, immediately, he's not going to be a good start this week. In week 14 at Philadelphia, the Eagles defense playing about as well as any team is any unit in the league right now. However, if Young's confidence can remain unshaken after that, I firmly believe, especially with a healthy supporting cast, he could push for low end QB1 production against the Cowboys in week 15, and they play the Bucs again in week 17. And each of those teams rank among the 5 most forgiving defenses against fantasy quarterbacks.
Not going to lie, Doug. You might be able to push for QB1 status if you played the Bucs. I'm kidding. You could not.
Yeah,
Sorry,
I would have been a good running quarterback at some point in my career, but I'm built like a quarterback now. I got good weight and I got good size, but I've lost it. I've lost my explosion. Thanks.
Sorry about that. Just like a quarterback. All right. Well, I'm interested actually in talking about our next player, but before we do, I want to give our hosts a little bit of love, Doug. So finish the season strong with IDP Plus. Visit idpplus.com, and for a limited time, get 20% off any subscription with the promo code PROPS. We are so much more than just IDP. Get access to our tools, data, and articles, and don't miss out on our subscriber Discord. So go to IDP Plus and start your march towards fantasy glory today. Now, Doug, somewhere, Al Davis is watching this next player and wondering why the hell his kid didn't draft him. Now, we are heading into the home stretch, and Isaac Guerendo is the presumed bell cow for the fading 49ers. What does the film from week 13 show us?
Well, I can tell you why Al Davis's kid didn't draft him is because he knew he had a future guy that we're going to talk about, not this week, but Sincere McCormick. He knew he had him in the pipeline. That's why. No, that's a great thought though. Isaac Guerendo would definitely be an Al Davis kind of guy.
Oh yeah.
To understand what Guerendo might be in the wake of Christian McCaffrey, of course he had the knee injury, and Jordan Mason. Now Mason hasn't been put on IR yet, which I find somewhat odd considering how quickly they put McCaffrey on, but that's neither here nor there.
Unless you play on sleeper. And then he was put onto IR and then back off of IR and then questionable. And then sleeper was pissing me off. I'm sorry. Go on.
To understand what he might be in the wake of those two guys probably being placed on IR it might help to understand who he was as a prospect and what he showed us the first half of the rookie season. Why would I say that? Because I don't think 42 rush attempts and 5 catches across 12 NFL games can only tell us so much, especially when he has yet to be asked to handle a full workload. Now, let me remind you, going to the prospect part, including his college days at Wisconsin and Louisville, he handled more than 16 touches in a game once in 6 years. 6 years of college, more than 16 touches once. And that was in the bowl game his final year. So his last college game, I think he had 27 or 28 touches in that bowl game. Okay, with that in mind now, Guerendo was not drafted to be the main man in San Francisco this season or next either, especially after the team signed McCaffrey to a two-year contract extension over the summer.
Freudian slip.
The 49ers selected him in large part because he reminded them of Raheem Mostert, who was a journeyman until head coach Kyle Shanahan and highly respected running backs coach Bobby Turner got their hands on him. And for people who aren't overly familiar with the NFL or don't get into the weeds quite like we do, Bobby Turner is largely thought of as the best running backs coach in the game right now, if not the best one of all time. He's highly regarded, just put it that way. And he's been with Shanahan, I think he's been in San Francisco for close to 20 years. But anyway, point being, but perhaps the biggest difference between Guerendo and Mostert is that Mostert ran 4.34 at the NFL Combine at 190 pounds in 2015. Guerendo ran 4.33 at 221 this spring. So we're talking about 30 pounds heavier, running just as fast. So you can understand why if Shanahan and Turner are seeing a guy whose vision they like, you know with them they're going to go after speed as it is. So it's a matter of whether the running back has the vision and the anticipation to run their outside zone, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so for those unfamiliar with Guerendo through the first month of the season, they were introduced to him after his 76-yard run on a Thursday night in Week 6 to close out a win over the Seahawks. That was the one where he slid at about the 3 or 4 yard line. He could have easily scored a touchdown, but he slid to run out the clock. And then his other explosive run was a 19-yard burst 2 weeks later against the Cowboys. And that was a Sunday night, I think. Since he barely saw the field in Week 10, and he didn't contribute offensively at all in Weeks 11 or 12, and then Week 13 or last week was a snow game in which he played sparingly, although he does deserve credit for keeping his balance on that touchdown run, which keeping anybody from San Francisco keeping their balance in that game last week was a small miracle. So it might be help. I found it helpful to turn to the fantasy points data suite to kind of encapsulate what he did before the team's Week 9 bye, because I don't think it does any good to refer to anything he's done over the last 4 weeks. Okay, again, these are small sample sizes because that's what Guerendo's given us. I mentioned before, was it like 42 carries and 5 receptions? So I kept the benchmarks fairly small. Among running backs with at least 30 carries through the first 8 weeks of the season, Guerendo had an 8.1% explosive run rate. That was 7th.
Okay. And
a 40.5% stuff rate, and that was 10th. And you can go to the data suite for the full explanation on the stuff rate. It's not some sites use stuff rate as 0 if you gain 0 or fewer yards, or if you lose yards or 0, that's a stuff. That's not the way the data suite does it. It's basically, if you're familiar with points over expectation, it's did you get 4 yards on first down? Did you get 4 yards on that kind of thing? So that's the stuff rate explanation they use in the data suite. Anyway, so let me repeat: 8.1% explosive run rate. That was 7th, and 40.5% stuff rate, and that was 10th among running backs with at least 30 carries through the first 8 weeks of the season. And I think that's about what we should expect from a good athlete in a great run scheme. He had his 0.16 missed tackles forced per attempt. That was tied for 26th. That was less impressive. Although, then again, it isn't all that bad considering it was better than full-timers such as Devon Achane, 0.15, Saquon Barkley, 0.13. And the reason I mentioned full timers there is because with more carries comes more opportunity, more potential for bad things to happen. So I also mentioned some part timers in the article. It's also on par with part timers such as Tank Bigsby and then former Wisconsin teammate Braylon Allen. Bigsby was a 0.19, Braylon Allen was 0.16, and each of those guys have proven they can force missed tackles. So we're talking about a guy, even though 0.16 isn't like top 10, it's still fair enough. So I'm not going to ask you what you saw from him in week 13, but what's your macro look at
So first, Bobby Turner was with Denver from 95 to 09.
So
then he went to Washington with Shanahan in 2010.
Okay.
Then the Falcons with Kyle in 2015. And then to San Francisco for 2017.
Okay.
So he's been a part of the Shanahan family.
Yeah.
For a long, long time.
I wasn't sure that he followed him at each stop with Shanahan, but I knew that he was familiar with Shanahan because that's how Terrell Davis, Alandis Gary, Mike Anderson, that's how that whole tree got started.
Yeah, that's very impressive. I don't know a lot of position coach names. That is one I have heard a lot. Mm-hmm. And just putting it together and seeing all the backs he has coached, well-earned reputation. Well-earned reputation.
They know how to teach outside zone.
They teach it well. So Isaac Guerendo, I don't know if I'm excited for him. I mean, Trent Williams is still out. I know he has an ankle injury. I know his family's dealing with a tremendous loss.
Yeah.
My heart goes out to that family. They haven't looked like the same team. I don't know what Guerendo's going to do. I know people went out. They spent a lot of fab on him. They're hoping that he does what Jordan Mason did, right, when CMC went out. We'll see. I don't think he's going to win people championships, but that probably means he will. But yeah, I went to my wires looking for him. I couldn't really find him anywhere. I did find Izzy available, but just kind of hoping the former Jet gets a shot.
Yeah, he's got that Jet blood, man.
That jet blood can't lose.
Jet fuel. He's got that jet fuel.
Oh, man, you were so close to being witty. God. Anyway. What do you think? What are you doing? You have to do all your waivers for your big money leagues tonight.
Well, I got $1.25 and oh, yeah. I'm in agreement with pretty much everything you said. I think he should attract a huge fab bid. But I'm going to get back. Yeah, he should attract a huge fab bid. He's a highly explosive running back in a proven scheme with one of the best play callers of this generation in Shanahan. Yep. Is he a league winner? If you like that term, is he a league winner? I'm going to say unlikely. Now, for our league winners, we like guys who not only bowl out early in the fantasy playoffs, but especially bowl out in week 17, right? Well, not only does he face one of the worst matchups for running backs during fantasy championship week, that being the Lions, and I think the only guy I can think of that's really had a great game against the Lions this year is Kenneth Walker.
Now, they have lost a lot of defensive players. Like this past week was rough.
Yes, you're right.
So that might get a little bit easier.
It's true. Now, having said that, I try, just like when I go out, I never try to have just one thing in mind. I try to make multiple stops, do two things, kill two birds with one stone. So I'm doing the same thing here.
You are old, buddy.
Not only is Detroit one of the worst matchups, and again, we can maybe they go from the second worst matchup to bottom 10 matchup, that type of thing. I think they will continue to be a below average matchup, regardless of how many guys they lose because that's kind of their fabric at this point is we're going to run on you and you're not going to run on us. But it should be noted that San Francisco running backs have combined. I think this will blow your mind. Have combined for 6 touchdowns this year. What did McCaffrey have last year by himself? 21, at least 21. And I think they're all receiving touchdowns. I don't think there's been any receiving touch. I don't think they've had any receiving touchdowns this year. So it's been Jordan Mason with 4. I think maybe he had 3. Maybe Juszczyk had 1 in there too. Anyway, 6 rushing touchdowns so far. So we're talking about 1 every other game. And then you highlighted this, and I wanted it had time allowed. And time and space allowed. I probably would have dug deeper into this. But making matters worse is the health of Trent Williams. He hasn't practiced or played in the last 2 weeks. He's got the personal hardship going on now too. I've seen splits that would not recently. This was when Trent Williams missed time last year. I want to say the difference in the offense. It's like 10 points per game less. The running game is I don't know if it's like a 30 or 40 yard drop off, but we're talking the whole offense as a whole. If you ever want to make a case for a left tackle being more important than any other position on the line, you look at Trent Williams' splits, and then you say, okay, so if you're an agent for a left tackle, you show them what happens when you take Trent Williams out of the offense. The 49ers offense is a much different and lesser animal when Williams does not play, as we both said. Now, I think Guerendo should see enough volume to be a solid RB2, although that again is contingent on Williams returning. Another problem, however, is if San Francisco's fade continues much longer, and I can't remember their record right now, but I'm going to say it's probably in the neighborhood of 5-7. 5-7. 6, I think it's 5-7. But if that fade continues much longer, the team could just end up deciding to rest Williams. We're talking about a 36-year-old guy right now, and he might need to be with his family more than he needs to be playing for a 5-7 team. So you take all that into consideration. Let's say that he's out they say, okay, Trent, go back home, whatever. I think then you're looking at Guerendo as a volume-based RB2 at that point. And I don't think that's even guaranteed because earlier in the season when Mason was having his issues, it was Guerendo was playing, but it was also Patrick Taylor was splitting reps with him. So, it might feel like I'm contradicting what I said as far as deserving a high fab bid, but we're also in week 14. So
what are you saving up for?
Yeah, and you're not going to get a starting running back. And how did I just say it earlier? He's an explosive running back attached to Shanahan. If you get Trent Williams back, then you got a chance for somebody who you can plug into the starting lineup without thinking much about it the final 3-4 weeks. But I also could see him being useful 1 week out of the final 4 too.
Much like timeouts to Eberflus, you can't keep your fab after the season's over. Too soon? Sorry.
I'm not even a Bear fan. That hurt me. That hurt me to the core. Oh,
damn! That game hurt me.
Oh.
All right, Doug. Ooga chaka, ooga ooga, ooga chaka, ooga ooga. You know I'm hooked on a Thielen, and I am high on believing. But are you in love with him? What does the film tell us about Adam Thielen's recent resurgence?
I'm not in love with you making baby noises. I know that.
You love it when I sing to you, my friend.
Well, as much as the fantasy community wants to forget about Thielen, he keeps reminding them that 34 is still relatively young. We're 37, so we're slightly older, but, we're still relatively young. For those who believe that his 70% route participation and 11.4% target share in week 12 was the new norm for the old guy, he proved them wrong in week 13. He ran 11 more routes, he went from 70 to 78% route participation, and he commanded almost twice as many targets. So that went up from 11-4 to 21-7. While fantasy managers need to keep in mind that the Buccaneers have been among the most favorable matchups for receivers all season long, Thielen's playing time and activity in Week 13 should be the expectation moving forward. Now, as I noted earlier with Young, Thielen's veteran presence is sorely needed in an offense relying so heavily on a second-year quarterback and 3 rookie pass catchers, unless you want to throw Tommy Tremble in there in all his veteran knowledge, but that's neither here nor there, right? For the sake of keeping expectations in check, the majority of Thielen's targets moving forward will be on plays where he finds a soft spot in zone coverage to help Carolina move the chains. I think if he had 10 targets this past week, I think that's right. I think 8 of them were right at the chains, or they were within 10 yards. I think I can say that with some confidence. However, that does not mean that is all he is, as he ran a nice post route that put the Panthers ahead late in the game, and then he had just a beautiful one-handed catch in overtime, which I personally needed for a fantasy matchup of mine, so I appreciated that. That one was probably 20 yards down the field. So he will, and if you want to go all the way back to Week 3, the play that he injured his hamstring on, that was a go route. So he will surprise you with his athleticism occasionally if you don't respect the guy. So why is he a good investment moving forward? Well, we remember this from Larry Fitzgerald at the end of his career. He got stuck. He got moved to the slot, right? And I think a lot of people question, okay, the guy's just getting too old. He's too slow. This, and that. Okay, well, if we didn't know before, we learned with him that you can put older guys in the slot and they can use all their savvy,
wild
guile and all that stuff. But part of the attraction to putting receivers in the slot, doesn't matter if they're big, fast, experienced, whatever, allows receivers to get free releases off the line of scrimmage. Short throws may not move the needle much, but they are high percentage plays. For the season, Thielen has run 103 of his 136 routes out of the slot. That's 76%.
Love it.
His average separation score on those plays is 0.126. Just for comparison, it's 0 on 33% perimeter routes. Okay, now
0.0?
0.0. Now, I understand 0.126 does not sound great, but among players who have run at least 100 routes out of the slot, that 0.126 ranks 10th among all receivers. So give kudos to the guy with a lot of experience and wild and guile, right? Yes. Golf clap, please. Yes. Additionally, NFL defenses utilize zone coverage more than 70% of the time in today's NFL. Among receivers who ran at least 25 routes out of the slot in Week 13, and I'm just doing that because it's the first time all season Thielen was healthy, and Carolina had a functional offense with Young as the quarterback at the same time. He had a 2.86 yards per route run, and that ranked 4th among receivers. So, as much as our eye is drawn to the speed, the quickness, the this and that, there's something to be said just to know how to run routes. We've learned that with Travis Kelce over the years. He's nowhere near the athlete he was 5 or 10 years ago. He still gets open against zone coverage. We're looking at the same thing here with Adam Thielen. What do you think about our? He wouldn't be our son. He would be our younger brother, right?
Much younger brother, my friend. Much younger. Listen, there is some part of me that likes when an old receiver starts playing well. Like, continues. I mean, last year he had over 100 receptions.
Yeah.
And he's looking like that guy. He's not a world beater, but he can catch the ball and he can get open. And what I like about the offense is that everybody on defense is expecting him just to do quick little moves. So, of course, that does then set up for some deeper shots, right? Because if you're already jumping on a short route, it's a perfect opportunity for a wily, great route running receiver to go right past you and catch the ball. So the post route, that one-handed catch, like on that one-handed catch, that was 0.0 yards of separation, right? Like that shouldn't have been caught. Maybe shouldn't have been thrown, but it was an amazing performance. So I do have Thielen in a couple leagues, mostly dynasty leagues where I've had him for a while.
Yeah.
And it's nice to see like the dust coming off as he starts popping up into my like starting lineup again at the end of the day. So I'm kind of excited for him. I'm happy for him. Yeah. Where are you? What are you thinking about him for fantasy?
Well, I'm going to be in the same place with him as I was with Bryce Young earlier. Now, the odds of him repeating last week's production, that was 8 catches, 99 yards, and a touchdown, that's probably not going to happen. Week 14, the Eagles are playing that well. They may not only be – they may be playing the best defense, and they're probably the best team in the league right now. So, even though Carolina is playing much better than they were, I don't expect that to be a close game, and I expect the defense. And why is that? Because Vic Fangio is that good, it seems to take defenses. It seems to take defenses about half a season to adjust to their new coordinator. And if you look at how much Philadelphia has improved, it looks like about midseason is when they took a huge step up. Anyway, but I like the idea. He's still available in plenty of leagues, from my understanding. He's not available in any of mine anymore. I mean, I have him in 3, but I'm in 18 leagues that I'm counting, that I'm tracking my records for, and that I can win money for, and I got him in 3. So anyway, but the idea of adding him to a roster just to use him in week 17 for a potential, or not a potential, but a rematch against Tampa Bay is an appealing idea, because you probably just added him off the wire a few weeks ago, right? So he's probably your wide receiver 6 at this point, maybe.
Right.
And if he's available on waivers right now, well, guess what? Like he's your wide receiver 7. So he'll be. You still may have to play him this week just because the 6 teams on bye. But anyway, my point being, you got Dallas coming up in week 15. You got Arizona in week 16. They've been slightly less forgiving against slot receivers than Tampa Bay, but all of them have given up about seven touchdowns in the slot. So that's not, and I think that was tied for 8th. I didn't put that in the article, but it's 7 touchdowns to the slot is still a fairly good number in terms of targeting players in the slot. But anyway, I think Thielen's importance to the Panthers offense should be enough to carry him in those non-Tampa Bay weeks, or at least this week. And then I think he's useful as a wide receiver 4 flex option at worst against Dallas and then Arizona. And then I think he has the chance to maybe not 899-1, but I think, I don't know, 670 and 6 catches, 70 yards, no touchdown. I think that's more than useful in week 17 and that's assuming that Tampa Bay pays him more attention than they did the first time. So, but yeah, I like him. If you have him, you're keeping him, and I would not hesitate to plug him in the starting lineup after this week.
Yeah, you know what amazes me, Doug, is that Deontay Johnson couldn't do anything in this offense. My biggest miss of this offseason was thinking Deontay Johnson was going to be able to show up. I mean, he's as good as Adam Thielen, and now he got suspended for a game by Baltimore.
You hear why, right? You heard why, right?
No.
Apparently he refused to go into the game.
Yeah, man.
What
is it with Pittsburgh? Like, was he going to strip off his shirt and go into the end zone? What the hell is happening to Pittsburgh wide receivers? Is that just that is how they draft him, right? Because we're saying the same thing with Pickens right now.
Yeah. I think the word you're looking for is mercurial.
Oh. Well, it's funny you mentioned that word because I was going to use it in a minute, and now I had to read it. All right, Doug, listen. Before we get to the last player who I'm about to describe as mercurial, Let's get a word from our sponsor. It's football season, and that means a trip to see your favorite team before the season ends. Well, with Expedia, you get the best prices when traveling, and we are thrilled for our partnership with them. Need a flight to Carolina, rent a car in San Francisco, or hotel in Denver? Go to idpplus.com/Expedia and build the best package to travel to the big game. Now, Doug, I'm reminded of a quote by the great Vincent Vega when he said, "Oh man, I shot Marvin in the face." Now, there have been times when I thought Sean Payton had literally done that because we couldn't find Mims anywhere on the stat sheet.
Yeah.
But over the past 4 weeks, the mercurial Mims, don't call me Denzel, has shown he deserves more work. But what are you seeing on the film?
Well, JJ, you remember not this past summer, but the summer before. Wasn't the summer of Marvin Mims? Did we not hear from just about everybody that had a advanced analytic? Marvin Mims is the truth. He is going to be okay. No, I don't think any player drove the analytics crowd crazier last season than him. Okay, here's part of the reason why. 4.38 speed, 39 and a half inch vertical,
Fantastic.
10 foot 9 inch broad. In his freshman year, I believe it was, he became only the second college player since 2014 to eclipse 4 yards per route run threshold before reaching the age of 19. So basically, as an 18-year-old, he was going 4 yards per route run. That's insane. Okay, and you understand why people who were just paying attention to the advanced analytics, you could see why they were losing their mind over him. Okay, so you take the athleticism, you take at least the advanced analytics production. The case for him was seemingly airtight, and I was thinking of you, JJ. I was thinking of our pod here as what it was when I mentioned this. Big fantasy, yes. Hashtag big fantasy was happy to punish the few fantasy managers and analysts who did not fall in line with Mims, making a huge impact as a rookie. It was a given. If you're new to fantasy or whatever, you have no idea what the summer of Marvin Mims was like. And anyway, and then JJ, 2023 happened.
Womp, womp.
Yeah. And then we were reminded just what kind of quality human being that Sean Payton is, or how little we can trust him, I guess. You remember Audric Estime, we're going to get him more touches.
Oh, yeah.
We're going to Jaleel McLaughlin. What was it over the summer? The guy's in there at 5:30 in the morning, so we're going to reward him with 5 touches a game. Okay, whatever. Anyway, he repeatedly spoke about giving our boy Mims more snaps. This is last year, to give him more picks, more snaps, only to let him rarely run more than 20 routes. Okay, for anybody that's not familiar, we want our receivers to run at least 30. And so I think there were 4 games last year, and they were all in the second half of the season where he ran more than 20 routes. So you can understand why people were upset. Then it wasn't quite Marvin Mims summer this year, but we did hear from like the Coach Speak Index and stuff like that. Payton doubled down. Marvin Mims, the leap that he has made from year 1 to year 2 is that it's without question he's going to get more. Yeah, and then he got used less this year than he did than all of last year. He didn't have more than 2 catches, and this is just production now. This isn't snaps or routes. He didn't have more than 2 catches or 18 yards in any of the team's first 9 games. So if the only reason you were holding on to Mims through the first half of the season is if you had him in best ball, because you dropped him after week 3 more than likely. Okay, so Fast forward to week 10, and I remember mentioning this on the show with you. We talked about this when we were talking about Audric Estime. And we talked about in that game how Javonte Williams, Jaleel McLaughlin, and Marvin Mims got backfield snaps before Audric Estime did.
Right.
And I thought that was the last time we were going to talk about Marvin Mims. But he was given some backfield work, as we just said. And it seemed like seemingly innocent. It just seemed like we're trying to find a way to use this guy, right? Because he's just rotten on the sideline otherwise. Part of what's helping this, too, is Denver is struggling to have a consistent running game. Okay, well, he had, in that Week 10 game, it was that near upset of Kansas City. He had 17 yards on 3 carries. Nothing, as I said in the article, not the stuff of legend, not anything to write home about.
Right.
But Peyton saw enough to give him similar work in Week 11, and he's maintained that since. The funny thing is, though, the big plays have been flowing for Marvin Mims since then, although none as a runner. His rushing production has been actually fairly minimal. So anyway, I mentioned the big plays. Working out of the backfield in the next week, so this is week 11. That was the 38-6 route of Atlanta. Mims gained 37 yards on a wheel route out of the backfield, and then he picked up 35 more on a swing pass in week 12 against the Raiders. Again, swing pass for you don't run swing passes to receivers, so it's just another running back route. The reason the reason he made this pod, the reason he made this article this week, his signature moment to this point of his pro career may have come on Monday night when he was working out of the slot, straight go route. And the reason this worked, and there's a great article on this, but of course he basically ran past both the safeties and caught the ball. Just a beautiful 40-yard pass in the air from Bo Nix, and he housed a 93-yard touchdown there. There was an article in the Denver Post about this, and about 4 or 5 weeks when they were playing Carolina, and he said they asked him about it. Same route, but what happened? Carolina was playing their safeties about 30 yards back, and I guess he didn't look up at the right time, and it was kind of just another low point in this series of low points for him up to his career. And anyway, they thought it might work in this game. And I don't want to get too technical here, but Jim Schwartz has defense coordinator for the Browns. He tends to rely on inverted cover 2 as opposed to just a typical cover 2. Well, inverted cover 2 is going to bring your safeties a little bit closer to the line of scrimmage. And so that's one of the reasons why they thought that this play worked, is because the safeties were closer, and sure enough. All right. Despite a 25% route rate, 5.4% air yard share, and a 10% target share. I mean, these are not great metrics. We want receivers running at least 70% of routes. We want air yard shares probably in the, we'd like to see them in the 20s. We want at least 15. And we want 20% target shares. We want 10% target shares. Anyway, 25% route rate, 5.4% air yard share, and 10% target share. Mims somehow ranks 32nd in the league with 211 receiving yards over the last 4 weeks. And with all those small, puny metrics, he has a league best 205 after the catch. 205 yards after the catch right now, right? And he's running a route every 4 dropbacks. All right. Mims still has yet to play more than 35% of the team's offensive snaps in a game this season. And it doesn't seem like Peyton has any interest in expanding that role yet, but what we're seeing here now is we've seen 21 touches over the last 4 games as opposed to 8 touches over the first 9. Moreover, there is a need for the big playability Mims brings to the offense. And I mentioned before, the running game has been average at best on most of its good days. In fact, the only one I can remember was New Orleans Thursday night back in, week 7. That was the week where none of us started Javonte Williams and he scored 2 touchdowns. That was the week. That was the one time that the running game worked. Of course, I remember that well because I was, So anyway, The Broncos need to get chunk gains from somewhere, and we're seeing chunk gains. We're seeing chunk gains from Mims. That alone, I believe, is going to keep Mims relevant for the rest of the season, even if his playing time does not increase. What kind words do you have to say about the Oklahoma Flyer?
Well, my father always told me if I didn't have anything nice to say about a person, not to say anything at all. However, this is a podcast. Dead air doesn't work. So, what am I supposed to say? He doesn't play snaps.
Yeah.
Like last week, I believe it was last week, 2 weeks ago, before the holiday, we were talking about how many targets a tight end needs to be a relevant tight end. Well, guess what? We're not even worried about targets for Mims. We're talking about him playing. I mean, sure. And I hate when people say, yeah, he got 105 yards, but 93 were on one play. You take that away. He earned those 93 yards.
Yes.
But let's not fool ourselves that he beat them on a spectacular route. They messed up.
Yes.
Right? They made a mistake. It reminds me of J.K. Dobbins in those first 2 weeks. Where he kept busting those long runs. But on every one, there was a defender making a terrible mistake. And he would run for 60 yards. So I'm not investing in a receiver. I'm not going to start a player who doesn't play 50% of the offensive snaps. And he's not even close to 50%.
Yeah.
So are you going to tell me something different about Mims?
Unlikely. I'll save this for the end, but there is one particular league that I would look at playing him and starting him. One type of league, and I'll get to that in a second. I'll try to remember it. With everything you said, with everything I said, let's be clear. Mims is a very highly volatile player, and that's not going. I don't think that's going to change. Between Cortland Sutton is the alpha. I think when they need to go short, you got Devon Vele. They're trying to work Troy Franklin in. There's other options. He's okay. We need a big play. I guess we'll find a way to get it to Mims. I'm encouraged with the increase in touches, and with somebody as explosive as Mims, that means something. Anyway, given his current playing time, he figures to be the epitome of a hit or miss fantasy option, which means he's likely too risky to start during the fantasy postseason outside of deeper leagues with multiple flex spots. And here's where I was going with this. So we've talked about the Kings Classic leagues that I'm in, right? I dropped a few bucks on getting him, and we're talking 3 receivers, 2 running backs, 3 receivers, 3 flex spots.
Yep.
Okay. And
14 team.
Yeah, 14 teams. So that is the kind of team that I'm looking to. I would be glad to add him in because you're just praying for some kind of upside from your third flex spot usually. And if you can get that kind of upside, if you're telling me that, yeah, first of all, he might have 3-point floor. Okay, well, you know who else has a 3-point floor? Every other one of my options on the bench. So
some of them have a 3-point ceiling.
Some of that, exactly. That's the ceiling for some of them. What the encouraging thing is, he has carved out a role, which is more than you could said at any point last year. So I think he should be on the majority of fantasy rosters moving forward, but he is a player who should only be started if huge upside is needed on a roster lacking it. And I'll just close by saying this. So let's say you add him this week and you go into fantasy playoffs. And I don't go crazy about looking at a site's previews and saying you're favored to lose by 15 points or you're favored to win by 20. Right. But I like to pretend that people that read my articles or that listen to this pod or whatever, they can kind of eyeball this stuff. You know what? I'm going against Saquon. I'm going against Achane. I'm going against Chase. You know what? I just need somebody to outperform their expectation by 10 or 15 points. Okay, this is the kind of guy that you're shooting for that. If your flex all season has been in like an 8-point floor and a 10-point ceiling kind of guy, so just kind of okay, that's the type of recommendation I'll make. There is in a 12-team league, you need upside, and you're pretty sure that if that ceiling isn't hit, that you're going to lose. Then what do you have to lose than hoping to get a 20-point game from Mims, because he is capable of it.
Is he?
Well, he said that. I think he had 17 this past week, I think.
19-9.
Okay. Was it 19-9? Then it was 17 a couple weeks ago?
13-3 against Atlanta.
Okay, 13-3 and 19-9. Okay.
So, for me, if it takes a 93-yard touchdown to get to 20 points for you,
yeah.
I don't think those grow on trees. But I understand what you're saying. Definitely in a deep starting lineups, yes, he's worth a shot. If you are like up a huge underdog, I get what you're saying. But man, his upside isn't a 40-point or 45 Jerry Jeudy week.
Right.
Which was great going to sleep, waking up. Like, I went to bed with insurmountable leads, and I woke up looking up the definition of insurmountable because I believe I had mountable leagues, which that's a whole different type of lead. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know, buddy. Anything else about Mims?
No, I'm with you there. I had a league where, I was kind of tracking the game. I wasn't able to watch it in real time, but I had the Broncos defense. I forget what the margin was, but I had the Broncos defense. Of course, they scored 2 defense touchdowns, and you're thinking, "Oh my God, I got 21 points for my fantasy defense." Oh, and by the way, I would once again win against Jerry Jeudy. So yeah, I don't know if I was close. I don't know if I had the lead in that game or not, but I did end up winning it, obviously. So yeah, but that's just the. I think with Mims, what we talked about in terms of playing time, in terms of the routes, in terms of all that stuff, that I think he is what he is going forward. I do think Peyton will find a way to get him more involved, but as it seems like with everybody that has any hint, any receiver that has some kind of rushing floor. I think coach is using him as the next Debo. That's not he's not the next Debo. This is not that's not where this is going. Okay, he's a big play artist that is right now getting some backfield work. Let's just call it what it is. Yeah, and I think you laid it out very well there. If you have to catch a 90-yard touchdown to get to almost 20 points, then that is definitely your ceiling. But
yes.
But the thing about it is when he's in the game, he's getting used, and that's the first step. And you'd like to believe that over the next 3 or 4 weeks that instead of 25% routes, we're looking at 35% routes or 40% routes. And I don't think that's too much to ask. We just haven't seen any evidence of it yet.
Well, much like an AA meeting, I think there's going to be 12 steps until I'm ready to start him. But it is time for us to say goodbye and let people know where they can find us and any final thoughts you have. Doug?
Trying my best to keep it short again. Please check out my article that we've referenced a few times, Fantasy Points that dropped earlier this morning. Please check that out. Coming up this week on FF Today, it'll drop Friday morning, Friday afternoon, somewhere in there. I'm not in control of that, but I will be doing the Dirty Dozen. And for those who haven't followed that stuff before, each year around Thanksgiving time, I do what's called Delicious Dozen and Dirty Dozen. Delicious Dozen I did last week. Those are the 12 cornerback, wide receiver cornerback matchups that you want. And then I do the Dirty Dozen as like the opposite, the counterpoint to it. That's coming up this week, so that you'll be able to see the 12 matchups that you want to avoid over the fantasy playoffs. When that drops Friday morning or afternoon, and that's what I got coming up.
All right, thank you, Doug. I'm at JJ Wenner on Blue Sky. FX. Thank you for taking the time for watching and listening to our pod. I hope you had a great Thanksgiving. Thank you to Doug, as always, for all of his work. Make sure you are reading his articles. The one that dropped on Fantasy Points today is fantastic, and all of his work on FF today as well. You can catch me tomorrow night on the Rider Dynasty podcast with Jameson Hutchinson and Joe Harlow. And that's about it. So remember, when in doubt, go all out. Boat drinks, my friends. Boat drinks.
Thank you for watching the IDP Plus YouTube network. If you enjoyed this video, give it a thumbs up and don't forget to subscribe to our channel. Be sure to tap the bell icon to get notified whenever we upload new content.